Good morning, good morning. All right, LDS stories of faith and courage as we continue. Here we go. Quince, the Roan Pacer of Shadscale by Albert R. Lyman. This is a superb story of a horse that could not be permanently tamed. It was written by the master storyteller of San Juan County, Albert R. Lyman. In the dry Shadscale stretches at foot of Clay Hill, a lone horse track crossed the trail. It had appeared before in the red dust of that vicinity, but where it came from and whether the creature itself were worth having, no one knew. Since a band of horse thieves escaped over the trail from New Mexico 4 years before, it had been there, but care of the herd or necessity of haste had so far prevented any investigation. When Steve Edison made his first trip to Pagarit, that track simply ignited the dry stuff in his curiosity. He hired to Walt again in September, and when they had met the appointed place, behold, Steve had with him a bay and a gray built chiefly for speed. At Cowtank, he proposed to cut a big sign over the mesas and by all possible watering holes east of the trail, and asked his employer to wait at a certain place in the Shadscale. Late that afternoon, impatient at so much delay in the scorching sun, Walt Wilson discovered his hired man approaching over the distant ridge. His horse bore telltale stratas of dry lather and dust, and began talking when hardly within hooting distance. "He waters at Hawk Tank," he yelled. "Oh, say, it's a bully place to catch him, and he is certainly a daisy, a single-footer." I came on to him, slap dab, and tried to turn him up in this way, but he just simply went off and hid. "It's getting late," protested Walt, who had killed good horses on the trail of bad ones more times than he liked to remember. "We'll have to be moving if we reach Clay Hill before dark." You know what old, the old kid can run," Steve proceeded, ignoring his employer's demur, "but kid lost him on every jump in spite of me." Wilson hesitated. He had resolved that his faithful horse servants should not be required to squander their noble strength for this wild desert creature. "And he's a broke horse," Kid's resolute manner went on, after a lapse of 2 jiffies. "Spots over its kidneys big as your hand." "I don't want him," growled the other. Edison's eyes came half shut in a scowl of disappointment. Pushing back his wide hat, he shoved his thick fingers through his blond hair. "These old fellers trust me and do their best," declared Wilson, warming with aggressive love for his dumb helpers. "They can't decide, and I'm their judge and their advocate, and I pronounce against any scheme to make them do more than our bargain calls for. But look here, we can cache ourselves there above Hawk Tank, and when he comes to drink tonight, for he's sure to come, we step out into the trail behind him, and he's ours. That's all there is to it." "Yes, it looks simple, but I want to stay right here. I'll not run my horses a rod after that locoed thing." "Why, when we get him, we'll more'n make up for those horses by riding him." "We ain't got him yet," snarled Wilson, and started the outfit on for the hill. "Will you agree to this?" Steve urged, using all oppositional as usual to render his own resolution more impregnable. "Camp down at Hawk tonight, and I pay all delay and furnish the horse flesh till we go on." They turned back over Edison's track, stopping a dark mile from the Wild Mustang's watering place. They heaped the packs under the tarpaulin by the rock, hobbled the loose horses, and, riding on into the night, cached themselves in the shadow overlooking the trail, which led to the tank in the gulch. The hollow croak of toads echoed up from the water, and a dismal owl groaned every 10 minutes from some indefinite place among the shad scale. Otherwise, those hours were still and tiresome, and long drawn out. It must have been midnight when the all but inaudible footfalls of a horse reached Steve's ear. "Listen," he whispered. The sound grew louder. Straight down the trail, it came with wanton regularity of ease and assurance, till Walt could hear his own quick pulse of uncertain anticipation. They could even trace the little cayuse's form silhouetted against the gray rocks. A second more, he would enter the stony gate of the trap. But he stopped, his head raised high, his ears like two vertical pegs on the top thereof. But a moment he waited, analyzing, as they both knew, certain offensive elements of the breeze in his strange chemical laboratory. Then he uttered that peculiar wild horse snort, like the puff of a steam engine, fierce and loud, turning, flew on fleet hooves up the trail. Suddenly again all became still. Then again that engine snort. He had confirmed his fears and was gone. But no, he seemed to kick and plunge and bawl like a vicious colt under the saddle. What could it mean? Did he really mock at the plot he had foiled? But now he went for sure. His beating hoofs died away over the hill. "Oh, say," gasped Edison at length, for he realized there was more to it than he had imagined. Next day, on Steve's horses, they followed the track 10 miles and sighted the Mustang in a swell near Cow Tank. East and south of him, yawned the cavernous gulch, and a rocky hill stretched along his north. If Walt would patrol the hilltop, his hired man would come in from the west, and they would crowd the little single-footer over on the cliff brow and lasso him. But their approach must be by a roundabout way, and with great caution on the wind, or the wind would betray it. Wilson reached his post and peered eagerly down the south side. He saw nothing. The place where the pony had stopped was directly below him. Later on, old Kid and his rider came up in view, but nothing else moved. Walt proceeded cautiously along the rocky backbone, till the string of deep-cut tracks caught his eyes. He signaled Edison to come up. "You satisfied?" he asked. Steve bent over the mute evidence in the dust and gazed anxiously in the direction it had taken. "Oh, say," he moaned, grabbing his blonde locks with his thick fingers, as if to prod his despair into new resolution. "That broomtail ain't had a drink since yesterday, that's sure. If he finds water, he'll pot up till he can run, and if you don't find him, he'll beat her out." It was still morning. Kid and Whiskers hadn't sweat a hair. Their master took account of these things and became himself at once. "We'll run the varmint down," he declared with rising spirit, and his employer fell in line like a hired man. Ascertaining a general direction of the track, they cut signs every half a mile, so to make sure it had gone in the direction they expected it would go. "If he's making straight for the cove," Steve announced after 2 miles of silence, "and we strikes over the bluff there on them red hills, and when you see him coming like mad, and me burning the earth at his heels, you turn him back and fly at him around the cove, and while I wait." Wilson considered it all a wild goose chase and nothing more, but he had agreed to 1 day of it, and he rode Whiskers on a lively trot to them red hills and cached himself on the tallest one. Edison's guess was correct. In half an hour, a rousing dust progressed toward the tall gray horse, who stood awaiting the roll's touch. How near or far old Kid burned the earth behind could not be seen for dust, and no time to investigate. When Walt galloped out in full view, waving his hat, the wild creature bent his beeline and dust around in a long curve to the north. Furiously after him dashed Whiskers, fresh and strong, crushing brush and weeds and scratching gravel left and right. The first essential was to pass the flying single-footer and prevent his going beyond this well-arranged cove, and the cove's mouth was 2 miles across, a horse-killing racetrack for boiling September noonday. The jargon's thick in this one. I suppose what he means by that is, so it, down in southern Utah, where you have a bunch of sandstone and such, if the corral is, imagine, either, I suspect that the corral they're talking about is like a sandstone mesa, and that sandstone has kind of a U shape in it that you can force cattle into, or horses into, to be a natural corral. And you just keep the mouth of it kind of closed off or watched over so you can't escape. And then the horses' hooves don't do well on sandstone, and that's why it's a natural corral. The a horse killing racetrack for boiling September noonday. I assume he means that this is a perfect cove in case you're trying to wrangle all the horses in September. Anyways, Whisker gained by quick and masterly leaps till he ran even with his desert competitor through 50 yards to one side. In the even race, they cover a mile each, doing his level best, the tame and the wild horse reaching alike for advantage they could not win. Then Whiskers began to fail. No encouraging or word of touch of spurs could hold him into his place, the place he should pass to save the day. And the wild Mustang drove straight ahead, his long tail resting horizontally on the breeze. Should Walt kill his willing gray horse, or bear the failure of Steve's foolish undertaking? Half a mile stretch between them and the coveted pass. With a thrust of spurs and a sharp word, poor Whiskers improved a little, but still falling behind. Suddenly Wilson drew up a full stop, threw himself to the ground, snatched his rifle from its scabbard, and dropping to one knee, fired at the pass he was failing to reach. His bullet sang to its mark, throwing up a small cloud of dust. He fired again. Again the dust. The desperate pony saw the disturbance before him and turned sharply into the cove. Whiskers, all panting and lathered from head to hoofs, had now an advantage. He could cut straight across the inside, while his antagonist ran wildly around the outside of the circle. He therefore burned the earth in glorious style at the Mustang's heels as they approached them red hills. Out of his cache galloped Edison, hat in hand, but the desperate cayuse seeming to turn to the right, whirled abruptly to the left, passing Kidd and his rider at close range in a volume of thick dust. The race proceeded straight for Clay Hill. 3 miles down the country, Walt overtook Steve, but where the wild thing had gone, he neither knew nor guessed. A huge blotch of dirty foam covered Kidd. The poor brute had panted, his great heart thumped, as if he would drop dead in his tracks. Whiskers couldn't prosecute the chase alone, even if their quarry were in sight. They headed for the hawk tank, moping slowly and silently up one slope and down the next. It was 3 o'clock afternoon, and hot as the flaming heat hereafter, to which we look uncomfortably forward. I could spit dust, swore Edison, his face a dark mop of perspiration and sand. We found water down here last spring, Wilson suggested. Without further words, they turned down the gulch to their left. 75 yards below, a trail led from one side, and on it, a lone horse track. "Oh, say," Steve exploded, alive in a second, as if it were morning and all hands fresh and full. "Can he get out?" And he waited with a dropped jaw to know whether his dream should yet be realized. Wilson wasn't exactly sure about the topography of the particular place, and both horsemen struck up a lively trot. Further on, the lone track seemed to have been coming back, but turned again down the gulch with violent stride. As the canyon became deeper and more box-like, Box Canyon, their lively trot developed into a gallop, and when that engine's snort echoed out assuringly from the bend just ahead, they spurred up to a keen run. The Mustang could flee no farther without plunging several feet from a ledge. The snorting and trembling ahead of the tail and erect, it waited near the rim, the appearance of its pursuers. Both lassos hung ready, loop and coil, before the game was sighted, and capture was but the inexorable process of advantage claiming its own. The pony yielded to the ropes. He had known it before, and the saddle too, as those spots over his kidneys plainly indicated. He opened his teeth to the foamy bit just pulled from Kid's open mouth, and he humped and shivered and flinched when Kid's hot blankets and saddle were laid on his back. He was a mare bay, inclined to roan, weighing perhaps 700 pounds. Oh, say, laughed Steve, reaching for the cinches, she's about as big as 15 cents. Discovering a fussy little Mexican brand on her shoulder. Mexicano? He asked, examining it. El tamaño de 15 centavos no obstante, he added, carefully tightening the largos. They referred to her as Quince Savantos, but ever since she had been Quince. She won't buck, declared Edison, seizing the cheek band and the horn and flattening himself as usual. He comprehended the horse's psychology from A to Z. She's to blame, full of water, even if she had the inclination. But Quince held a nervous ear cocked on her captor, like the hammer of a shotgun. Her fiery little eye, arched neck, and dynamic posture looked anything but submission. Had she surrendered? Never, never, never. She couldn't say it with the tongue of man, but she could proclaim it emphatically with muscles and hooves of a horse. That was no doubt her affirmation as she departed from Hawk Tank the previous night. Steve had no more than lifted his leg to cover the cantle when she began to say it again, and she continued to say it with rising emphasis across the gulch and back along the dizzy ledge. Turning up the trail, she stomped with it with such a fury into the sand and over the rocks that her rider lost hold with fingers and spurs, and bouncing over her head, came down on his side, down on his own. But Steve Edison, more persistent in his purpose, when wrong side up than other men are on their feet, clung to this heavy bridle reins, neck or nothing. When Quince would have scattered him along up the gulch and away over the shad scale, Whiskers and his rider forced the argument to a close. Oh, say, declared Steve, rubbing the dust out of his eyes, spitting it from his mouth and hastily classifying his jumbled self. She's sure the concentrated essence of a horse. I'll pay big for for your trouble, and she's mine. But say, I want you to snub her when I get on again. She'll come out of the kinks and beat anything in the mountains. Walt held her nervy little nose solid to his saddle horn, and she suffered herself to be ridden without protest. Before they reached camp, she provided her knowledge of all training and discipline that saddle and bridle imply, and she carried her proud little self with the elegance to fascinate a king. That night, she was hobbled and rehobbled and cross-hobbled, and strange to say, they found her nearby in the morning. Over Clay Hill, down to Pegrit, and back to the hill again, she always wore strong hobbles when not in use, which was seldom. Okay. Sorry, I thought a hobble was a small pony, but she was hobbled. So I'm wondering if that's a certain horse gear that is put on them. Is that the horseshoe? Let me just check. What does it mean for a horse to be hobbled? Question mark. It's a device which prevents or limits locomotion of an animal by tethering one or more legs. Hobbles are most commonly used on horses. Oh, okay. So here's a picture of it. They tied a rope around the front legs. It's like tying their shoes. that kind of thing. Interesting. Okay. So they basically, so she was hobbled, rehobbled, and cross-hobbled. So they basically tied her feet to each other, probably the front and the back, and then across one another, so that way she couldn't get away. All right. Now this makes more sense. Sorry, I'm not familiar with a lot of horse terminology. All right. And strange, they actually found her nearby in the morning. Over Clay Hill, down to Pegreet, and back to the hill again. She always wore strong hobbles when not in use, which was seldom. Oh, say, Edison never tired of repeating. She beats anything in the shape of a horse I ever saw. If you'd boil Whiskers and Kid and your whole outfit down into one horse and offer 'em to me with 10 yearling heifers for quince, I'd tell you go to glory. When they approached Clay Hill, the little single-footer's face wore a dejected expression. For a week past, she had permitted herself to be caught, unhobbled, saddled, and ridden, merely as Kid or Whiskers. Say, you remember that shelf on the south side? Asked Steve as the two approached the summit. Always grass there, and you put horses on it and a camp on the trail, and they can't get away. Let's camp there tonight, so little mare can get something to eat without being hobbled. It was agreed. They made camp in the narrow entrance and led weary creatures out into the best grass. Steve glanced at lofty precipice above and abrupt ledges below, and pulled the head stall from Quince's ears. For a minute she stood as any tired horse would stand, then moving to the edge she looked down. Beyond the foot of the hill, and plainly in view, stretched the shad-scale plains she loved, and from their heated surface came warm evening breeze. Her captors arranged their camp 50 yards away. The glorious instinct of liberty flamed up afresh, soothing her weary limbs and pumping the fire of invincible strength to every tissue. Her neck arched, her shapely head and flowing tail rose high, and she uttered that engine snort which means the desert and liberty. Then over the rim she plunged. She slid with loose earth to the next rim and plunged again. Ah, say, groaned Edison, leaning desperately out from the top and searching for the dust and the noise of his beloved single-footer. These steep slopes, the high ledges, the loose stones, and no tame horse could follow, save his neck. On the last rim she came into full view. It was higher than the others, and she shrank from the mad leap, trying to stop. 'Twas no use. Her own weight would have carried her over, even if the stony avalanche behind had been stayed. Uttering her cry for liberty, she sprang to clear the rugged wall and disappeared. She's done for, declared Walt. She'll roll to the bottom with every bone and splinters. But she appeared again, wending her way among the rocks at the base of the mountain. In the first open space, she struck up that rhythmic motion which causes men to look at single-footers with covetous eyes. Before her stretched the night and the shad scale. Would she be overtaken? Never, never, never. After a minute of that graceful step, just to prove herself all there and unbeaten, her heels flew high, her lithe little form plunging and whirling, declaring in the language of horses, "It never shall be." When she had made her declaration clear to her heart's content, stomping it with uncontractable decision in the dust, she snorted her cry of freedom, long and loud, looking back in proud disdain at the mountain behind. Then she became a vanishing comet, whose long tail of red dust drifted away over the shad scale. Just where she watered after that, no one ever knew. Steve had no time that trip to undertake her recapture, and a change in his affairs took him away into another state from which he never returned. When Walt Wilson passed for the last time through that section 3 years later, a lone horse track in the shad scale reminded him of, "Oh, say," and Steve Edison, looking toward Hawk Tank, had a tiny speck on the ridge. He had barely time to wonder if it were Quince, before it became the moving hand of a comet-like dust, and he never And he knew the little single footer said, never, never, never. All right, I want to look up two things. What they mean by single footers. Okay. What is a single footer horse? So, single footing horses. Single footing horse, or single footer, American single footer horse, is a breed of light gaited horse renowned for its smooth, intermediate 4-beat lateral gait. Okay, so it is a horse that can do the high step kind of thing. So something like this. So I guess kind of a breed of horse? And just in case, I think of shad scale as the mountains with all sorts of loose rock in it. So, what is shad scale? It come up with Chad scale. No, this is shad scale. What is shad scale? Good, I typed it right this time. Also known as spiny saltbrush, drought-tolerant evergreen shrub. Oh, okay. Shad scale. So instead of the rocks, it's about the scrub plants. Okay, all right. Well, that particular author was quite good at using his vocabulary for horses and the environment. I myself was quite unfamiliar with several of it. But, let's see here. Do you think I can get the story of Gibson the Imposter in? Let's take a look here. Maybe. You know what? We'll keep it brief this time. It's because I think it's a good idea. We have 2 more stories after this, but man, oh man. I guess when you actually work with and enjoy being with the horses, you really get the sense of how it all works out and what they're like. I think we're pretty darn removed from it. I know there's a lot of romance in the old westerns about horses and how they work and operate and everything like that, but there's a true speciality when you have such respect for your animal that you ride with and everything like that. In fact, it was really funny. The other day, I saw a meme on the internet where it said they had the dogs. They had a picture of a dog, and they had a picture of a horse, and the horse said, "You call dog man's best friend when you've been riding horses for thousands of years and not complaining once." And there's something really special about how really well horses are perfectly made as something to help humans in all our endeavors. So grateful for them, and grateful they've carried so much of civilization on their back for so long. So I think it's well deserved when we have good horse stories. The next one, though, story of Gibson the Imposter, is a true account by W.M. Clough of Gibson the Imposter who failed in his bold schemes to deceive the Hawaiian saints. Oh, that'll be interesting. Yeah, see, that's the other funny thing about church history, is how after the saints moved to Utah, there were different really big areas that the church tried to push into for missionary work. At first, it was stuff like England and the Netherlands, so the Dutch, and a few parts of Europe, but especially England. That was kind of right at first. But in addition to that, when the Sins moved to Utah, it was the islands of the sea. So they went out to Hawaii and all of Polynesia that they could, and there was a lot of members of the church that joined there. Many of them came to Utah, but not all of them, of course. And even they had to colonize different parts of Utah. There was a colony out west of Salt Lake City. So if you know the topology, well, the geography of the area, west of Salt Lake City, directly south of the Great Salt Lake, because Salt Lake City is actually more southeast. Well, southwest of Salt Lake City is, or just literally straight south, is Tooele. Well, there's this mountain range that sandwiches Salt Lake City. There you've got the one on each side. Well, same thing goes on the other side of that mountain range. There's a mountain range here, Great Salt Lake right to the north. There's another mountain range further out, and it extends down. Well, if you go south from there, there's really nothing much. But that used to be a ranching place. I think it's called Nephi? Let's see. No. I keep charging my phone, and I keep, oh no, gotta unplug it, gotta look this up. I think they called it Nephi, but let me check here. There's Tooele. Oh, is it one more over? It is one more over, even from there. Oh, that's Dugway. There's Skull Valley. A little north of Dugway. Yep, I got it wrong. It's one more over from there. So just on the, what's called Skull Valley. So, yeah, there's Horseshoe Springs. Yeah, so this is it. Okay, so to reiterate, you have Great Salt Lake here, right? You've got in the, well, let me turn it around since I'm facing you, right? So southeast is going to be Salt Lake City. Directly south is Tooele, and there's mountains between them, and then another mountain range. And on the other side of that, over here, would be Skull Valley. And they have a place called Horseshoe Springs, which is a little great. Iosepa, that's it. Iosepa is where a whole bunch of the saints who came from the Pacific Islands, I think mainly Hawaii, yep, mainly Hawaii, came to be part of Utah and the saints here. And they built this ranch in this unforgiving place as far as could be from anything resembling Hawaii that I can tell. But they were successful at it. Although it's mostly died out now, it's still a beautiful monument to the testament of a people that did the best that they could and wanting to join the saints. Now, and still in Salt Lake City, there is a strong Polynesian presence because of those who converted to the gospel and decided to join with the saints in Salt Lake. So, to give you an idea of where Iosepa is. So, there's big old Salt Lake City. Here would be the Tooele Valley, and then that little mountain range there. Iosepa is on the back side of this. So, there's Iosepa. And there's Salt Lake City. So, fascinating bit of history. I think it's very rare for people to know and understand that. So when I hear grand stories of the church and people from the islands coming to Utah, like the prior story, it's a little nearer and dearer to my heart, only because I had grandparents that served in the islands as senior missionary couple. And so plus having family friends that are from the islands and such, or having at least their heritage come from the islands, it's wonderful. It's a great place. I've visited there, and great people there, and great people here that came from that. And so I look forward to next time, and hopefully we can enjoy the stories about the horses running wild and the freedom that they seek every so often, but always be grateful for those that decided to help serve alongside mankind. And hopefully we do our best to serve one another so that we can have the Spirit of the Lord with us. And with that, I hope the Spirit of God is with you. Have a great day.